Hello and welcome to this exclusive interview. Our guest today is Justice Dr. Chifundo Kachale. He is the chairperson of the Malawi Electoral Commission. Welcome.
Thank you.
Looks like you can run and you can hide, but you can't escape our eye. So we finally found you here at Nkobola.
Well, it seems like you're doing a very good job of tracking us down.
Well, but thank you so much, and sorry to barge into your, what I presume must be kind of a retreat.
Yes, we're trying to kill two birds with one stone, really. Okay. After such a hectic time, we decided to take some time off to rest, but also in a funny kind of way, it's the first opportunity we have to interact with our own staff. We really just hit the ground running from the 9th of June.
Yes, yes.
So this provides a very good opportunity to be able to interact.
Are the birds being killed?
Yes, so far so good.
So far? You end up doing more of one than the other?
At the moment, we can't run away because the work we have to do at the moment also includes providing final reports for the elections. So we're still working.
Cutting to the chase, you came in at a very, very turbulent time when there was so much happening on the political scene and as the Electoral Commission, so much was going on. And then, boom, a new Electoral Commission chairperson has been appointed. I don't know how you got the news. Were you prepared for it, or it also came as a surprise to you?
Well, the most preparation I got was because my Chief Justice had briefed me that I was going to be one of the names you'll be submitting. Okay. So at that stage, I expected to be one of the people the President would be considering. So I had that 1 week of preparation. Mm-hmm. And when the announcement finally came on the NBC in the evening on Sunday, it was a pleasant surprise.
Did you think you'd be the one? Or maybe it's just like, well, my name is there, I don't know, whatever comes.
It was really whatever comes.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot control those processes, and but you are glad that you've even been considered in the running.
It must have been quite a scary prospect, I think, because at that time you had almost just about 3 weeks, I think, to finalize the preparation and conduct an election.
Well, it was quite a challenge, but I think in life one has to rise to occasions like those because there are opportunities to work and also to work with God in a way, because it's really a faith project to be able to do that kind of work in the time available. So it was a very exciting prospect in that sense.
Now you've got the time to sit back and look at the entire process and whatever went. What stands out? Especially, let's look on the challenges that you must have encountered to make sure that things work. And I must give it to you and your commission. Things did work because we had an election and a winner was found and sworn in. As we are speaking, we now have a new president. So by and large, things worked. But what were some of the major challenges that probably threatened that process?
Well, organizing an election, in my mind, was always very clear that it's a huge logistical challenge.
Yes.
Because you're trying to arrange things simultaneously that will happen on one day across the whole country, and everything should work well. So being able to put the logistics in place was always going to be a challenge in the circumstances. But like I've explained before, when I had a brief with our CEO, we were made to understand that a lot of work had already been done. Mm-hmm. The bigger challenge coming in was that of the 29 billion kwacha that had been appropriated by Parliament, 20 billion had yet to be disbursed.
Yes.
And we could not do any activity without the money. So being able to access those funds through the Ministry of Finance, to me, was one of the most critical challenges that we encountered. But we're grateful that with God's grace and the intervention of the appropriate authorities, the money was made available, and as we speak, all the money has been disbursed.
Now, not necessarily to take the shine from the work that you did, but how much work really did you do when you got in there? Was it like maybe 50% of the groundwork had already been done, or 75% had already been done, or you literally had to almost start from scratch? Because that's the kind of feeling we had.
We didn't have to start from scratch, and also that's the impression I told the CEO when he gave me a brief. I said, I think you haven't done a good job of giving out information on what you've been doing. Because, for example, there were a lot of forms that had to be revised according to the court judgment.
Yes.
The commission took a decision to recruit a higher caliber of people to be polling officers. That process had already been done. The polling manuals had to be revised to comply with the definitions of some issues that the court had highlighted. All that work had already been done, and the manuals had already been printed. The training programs had started partially because the trainer of trainers had been trained already. Our biggest challenge, I believe, was to now inspire the Secretariat to believe that this job can be done.
Yes.
So coming from a place where people had been subject to so much vilification and criticism, and to be required to do the same work all over again was a challenge. And my approach was to really implore upon them as public servants to recognize that because they're in public office, they can't run away from criticism, but they cannot allow that criticism to hinder how they deliver on this new opportunity. So my job was really to inspire the team to get to believe that we can do this job and do it better than we did last time.
I can imagine how hard it was, because, I mean, obviously, standing from where I am, there are names that stand out. There were the two commissioners, Commissioner Matanga and Commissioner Kunje, and then the Chief Elections Officer himself, Mr. Samuel Fandika, and I think the IT guy, Mr. Muhawi Chisi. These are names that came out, especially in the course of the court case. But still, also the backroom staff, they must have gotten quite tired of this because they had just come out of managing a tripartite election. How hard was it to get them to work and deliver an election all over again?
Two things. First of all, we did not have the luxury of time to begin to deal with whether or not these people were incompetent at our level.
Okay.
We had a team to work with. My approach is always to value people as individuals. So I engaged these people personally to help them understand where I'm coming from, that I'm not coming there as a public servant. I recognize that there may have been challenges, but I need them to work with me to deliver the job. So trust is a decision that one makes. You can choose, because somebody has failed before, to write them off completely. I didn't think that was an option available to me in the time I had. I chose to let the people know that I trust and believe in their capacity to work with me and get the job done. So at that level, when somebody has been given that level of trust, it is up to them whether they will live up to my trust or not. I wanted them to believe that I have confidence as their new electoral chairperson that we can work together and pull off a successful event. So my biggest asset in that regard was that they were there. They are people who have done the job before. Whatever the history, I said, let's not look to the past. We have a very unique opportunity to do something different and allow people to judge us on the basis of that. So it was really a level of engaging them and putting courage back into their hearts to believe that this is an assignment that they can well undertake.
So you didn't have any reservations whatsoever. You said, this is a perfect team. I'm gonna deliver an election with this team. But I mean, there's a point where you'll be like...
From my own life experience, I believe everybody deserves a second chance in life. I don't believe any one of us can stand up and say, I've never made a mistake. I do believe people can make mistakes for whatever reason. I will not interrogate that. But like I said, my understanding was, these are the people you've been given to work with. You don't have time to begin to check people out or select who you're going to work with. You needed a quorum in the commission. You needed the technicians to carry out the work. I made it very clear as a matter of decision, as the leader of that team, to say, I'm going to work with these people. I'll believe in them. I want them to know I stand for them. That's why every public briefing that issue came up, I never minced my words. I stood by my team. And I believe they have rewarded my faith in them by the way they worked.
But still, the two DPP commissioners, did you find any legal value in the assertions that people were making that they didn't need to be on that team all over again?
Allow me to refrain from commenting on the issue of the competency or value of those people, because I'm aware that there is a judicial review still proceeding in the court. They were removed as interested parties, but that case against the appointing authority is still subsisting. It would be out of order for me as a sitting judge to begin to comment on a matter that's proceeding in court.
You consistently made reference to the appeal judgment when you appeared before the press and such like. Did it help you do your job better, making reference to that and possibly see how the appeal judgment made some guidance on how the election should be conducted?
From the time I got the appointment, it was very clear that we are going to undertake a very unique election, because this was a court-sanctioned election.
Yes.
And the court had found specific faults with how the previous election was run last year. Our mandate was to ensure that to the best we can, we respond to every criticism that the court raised about how the previous elections were done. So that was indeed our checklist. That's what informed our decisions. So for instance, there was a decision we took to print ballot papers without deploying people to go and supervise that process in Dubai. My understanding was there was a good practice that had arisen whereby the commission and the candidates' representatives would be able to travel and witness that process. But we didn't have the time or the resources. In the context of the COVID-19, there was no opportunity to go and witness that process and be able to come back and be available to do the work. When we recognized that that good practice was not a legal requirement, we took the decision to dispense with it, because we had to ensure that whatever we did was in full compliance with the law as interpreted by the courts. So in my understanding, it was very clear that we had to respond to the issues that the courts had highlighted if whatever we're going to do would receive the approval of the courts.
You were stepping in an office that had been vilified, as you put it. The officers had been vilified, and people felt the Electoral Commission messed up this election. And I'm sure you must have felt like you're walking on eggshells, because you feel like, what if we mess this one up again, and then we have to go through that court process all over again?
Well, that's the risk that we had to take. And it wasn't an uncalculated risk. We took adequate mitigating measures. Like I said, the forms that required to be revised had been revised. We had designed a very comprehensive training process to ensure that all the key personnel appreciate their roles very well. We ourselves as a commission deployed across the country to try and attend as many trainings as we were able to do, but also to tour all the different constituency and nerve centers and district tally centers to just make sure everything was in place. So we did what we could, humanly speaking, to ensure that there's no repeat of that process. Like we said, we also changed the caliber of the people who were actually discharging some of the critical functions. But above all else, we were also mindful that this time around, we were running one election. So we believe that also allowed our officers to be under less pressure than when you're trying to do 3 elections at the same time. So there were many factors in our view that made it possible for us to respond to the challenges that had been identified and be able to put in place the measures that would mitigate those risks.
This is an exclusive interview with Justice Dr. Chifundo Kachale, the chairperson of the Electoral Commission. Stick around, we'll be right back. Welcome back. This is an exclusive interview where we're talking to the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Justice Dr. Chifundo Kachale, who made reference to the issue of security in the course of preparing for the election. And there was time actually that you said that you had been forced to beef up security because of something that had come up. We never knew what it was. Are we going to know now?
Well, we are mandated under Section 8 of the Electoral Commission Act to make sure that we provide a secure environment within which people can cast their votes. And in the discharge of that mandate, we create a security task team that comprises the different security apparatus in the country. That's the Malawi Defense Forces, the police service, and where necessary, we also call upon our colleagues from the prison services to beef up our resources. So those people have the technical competences to manage issues of security, and we were receiving regular briefs on the situation on the ground. And where appropriate, they had to beef up the deployment of personnel to respond to the intelligence we were receiving. And we do believe that the evidence on the ground shows that adequate measures were put in place to avoid any interference with the process of elections.
And there were rumors that some ex-soldiers had been recruited, I think somewhere in Kota. That story made quite some inroads. Did that amount to anything? Was that true?
If you remember, Brigadier General Bless Sayenda did confirm that some ex-servicemen had been apprehended and that they are also putting in place their own responses, and when appropriate action has been taken, the nation will be informed. So yes, there was a whole list of people who were ex-servicemen who had been apprehended in different parts of the country, and measures are being taken to address that anomaly.
Running an election like this, the results start coming in and the tallying starts, and at a certain point you realize that the incumbent is actually going to lose, and then it gets confirmed that the incumbent is going to lose. Quite an unprecedented case, especially in African politics. Did that put any pressure on you to say, oh my goodness, I'm presiding over an election where an incumbent is losing, and you have to face the unpleasant situation of having to announce the results where the incumbent has lost?
From my perspective, I think the fact that the incumbent constituted an electoral commission to run an independent, free and fair and credible election presupposes that the outcome of that election is not known. And our job as the Electoral Commission is to ensure that every vote is accounted for, and the result that reflects the democratic will of the people of Malawi is what is going to be communicated. So whether that would be the incumbent or his opponent who gets to win, I think for us as an Electoral Commission is neither here nor there. Our job was really just to tally the votes and declare the winner based on what the people have said.
From your experience in running this election, at what point do the candidates get to know the result of the election? Is it when all of us are listening to you delivering that all-important last press briefing, or you would have appraised them of the result before that?
No, we don't appraise them of the result before we make the formal announcement, because that's a legal process. We are not under any obligation to disclose that. But interestingly, you see, the way the system is arranged is that all the results are shared to all the candidates right at the polling station level. Mm-hmm. So, barring the issues that arise at the National Tally Center in the context of complaints and some of the null and void votes that are reversed, at some level they have some tentative indication of what the outcome is likely to be. And they are also present at the National Tally Center when we're making our regular announcements, our updates. So really the whole process is very transparent so that anybody who wants to follow it can follow it. The difference comes in that our formal final announcement can only be made when we have resolved every complaint submitted to us, when we have also reviewed every null and void vote that was submitted. So that technicality means that we are the only one competent to pronounce on the final formal outcome. Mm-hmm. But insofar as tentative results are concerned, I do believe everybody who's interested at that level has some indication of what is likely to be the outcome.
I thought out of decorum, maybe you would still want at least the president to know, to say, okay, I mean, you don't want to hear it on the radio, this is what we're going to announce in maybe a couple of hours' time.
That would curtail the whole legal process, because the legal process has to be complied with, and especially, like I said, in the context where the commission was faulted insofar as the legal process was concerned in holding the previous election, my understanding of our role was to avoid doing anything, no matter how nice it may appear, but that's a departure from what the law establishes.
So I should take it that all the candidates heard it the moment we heard it from you that this was the official result of the election.
Yes, because that official determination had just been made upstairs like 5-10 minutes before we stepped out.
Yes.
So we had to meet as a commission, confirm the outcome, and all of us sign up to that outcome, and then come down and make the formal announcement.
Did you receive any complaints as to how the election had been conducted from any of the contesting candidates?
Yes, we did get a total, we said 10 complaints at the National Tally Center. Mm-hmm. Some of them were legal, some of them were procedural, some of them were criminal. Now, insofar as criminal issues were concerned, the party will be alleging that our monitors were chased from this place, they were not able to do this.
Yes.
The police would be informed and the police would give us a report, said, yes, we have got a report on that. Arrests have been made, or we intervened and the situation was resolved, the monitors were able to go back. So the criminal matters, we directed them to the right authorities. The procedural issues, we also handled them, where they'll be alleging that some aspect of procedure was not fully complied with. The candidate for Mbakuwaku, for example, raised the issue of the candidature of Dr. Chakwera and Professor Mutarika, whether they were validly constituted as a ticket. And we said under the reading of the law, a candidate is the presidential candidate. They were entitled to change their running mates. So every complaint we received formally through the appropriate channels, we had to address before we could competently announce the result. And the parties were communicated in writing.
And you did resolve all of them?
We handled all the complaints that came.
What formed the bulk of the complaints? What was the common complaint that that the parties made?
I think they were diverse.
They were quite diverse.
They were diverse. I think, like I said, there was the issue of the legal competence of the people to be candidates. There was the issue of whether their monitors were available.
Yes.
We investigated that and established that actually the reports showed that most of the centers or the monitors were available. And indeed that information was verified even by the situation room created by the various CSOs, that in over 95% of the centers all the monitors were available. So every decision we took in responding to every complaint was based on information we were able to gather given the time we were working.
Now that's quite interesting, because I remember particularly the Democratic Progressive Party saying that one of its monitors had been assaulted, and actually I remember Honorable Tupere Moses saying that one actually lost her life, and that 15 other monitors were not allowed to monitor the election process, and that they had been reported missing. So that was not true.
We don't have that information at the Commission. And like I said, every report made, whether by the DPP or by the MCP, where matters were of a criminal nature, we engaged the police directly, and they would give us information. If they say, okay, we have received that report, but we don't have information that that is true, that's what we would convey. So we would get the information and communicate directly to the parties to say, the complaint you're raising raises issues of a criminal nature, and we've directed that to the appropriate authority. We were not in a place, and we've been trying to emphasize this, that the notion that everything that arises in the context of elections is the mandate of MEC is not entirely true. Law enforcement is law enforcement. Whether during elections or outside of elections, there are law enforcement agencies who have the mandate to enforce the law. We only get implicated if those law enforcement issues have a bearing on the levels of security for people to exercise their democratic right to vote. And on the evidence we have in our commission, nothing occurred that warranted a description of anything other than security that was available for every vote that was cast to be counted. For every voter wanted to go and vote, to go out and vote. That really was our mandate.
Did you observe any attempt by any of the politicians trying to influence you as a chairperson or the commission into ensuring that the result comes out in their favor? Did you get any attempts?
No. And quite honestly, Joab, I wonder how they would do that given the arrangements that were in place. Because like we said, the votes will be cast at the polling station, and the result declared at the polling station, shared with all the political party representatives, and published for the whole world to see. We would ultimately get those results, and actually the signing, the process that took so long was because we had to sign over 9,200 pages, every single one of the 7 of us. We couldn't rush that process. Everybody had to be satisfied that the result they were putting their pen to was a valid result. Now, given that that record was generated at that level and shared with everybody, I wonder how intricate the process would have to be to try and alter that outcome. Because by the time we're getting the results at the National Tally Center, subject to the complaints and the null and void votes that we reviewed, everybody had information as to what was the outcome of that election.
What would you want done differently if you had, say, more time and let's say you're the one to manage the next election and now you'll have had like maybe 4 or 5 years to prepare? What would you say, well, we managed to do this election under these circumstances, but given more time, these are the things that I think we needed to do better, or these are the things that we need to look into?
It would be a little premature for me to now begin to speculate as to what those actions would be. As we said in our very first press briefing, we've created 2 committees in our commission now. The Legal Affairs Committee, but also the Research, Monitoring and Evaluation Committee. Now that the elections are over, the Research, Monitoring and Evaluation Committee has to do their job and identify the areas where we can do things better. The Legal Affairs Committee, we expect them to take on board the responsibility of identifying what laws need to be reviewed, what processes need to be changed to give us a more manageable and a more effective electoral process. So those activities are going to be undertaken in due course, and would like to make informed decisions, but also the decisions ultimately are not our own. They are for the key stakeholders. The Parliament, the people of Malawi are going to have to be consulted as to what sort of reforms would be appropriate. And it would be a little premature for me sitting here when we've just done the job last week to pretend that I have all those answers, because it's quite an onerous task. But to be fair, I believe any system can always be improved.
As we're getting towards the end of this chat, tell me about your relationship with Justice Dr. Jane Ansah. How was the handover process like? What was the chemistry like working with her?
I had no problem with Justice Dr. Ansah. She has been a very senior colleague for a long time since I joined the bench. She's somebody I've always looked up to. As a matter of protocol, I had to get a proper handover brief from her, and she gave me a good number of hours for that process, pointing out to me the challenges. I didn't have the luxury of not meeting her in a way, because I had to come in and get to work with the people she had worked with for over 4 years. So encountering her was a very useful engagement on my part. But for the record, I also reached out to former Chairperson Kalaile, a retired judge of appeal. Unfortunately, wasn't able to meet with him. I talked to retired Chief Justice Ansah, as somebody who'd run elections before, and got some wisdom from her as well. So because this is a public office, Joab, and I think you can always learn from the wisdom and experiences of those who have gone before you, even if it is to learn how not to do what they have done before. So in my mind, it was always clear that I'm going to have to engage with my predecessor in office, because it's a public office. I can't assume this office without engaging her.
She had indicated that it would need a bit more time to manage this election and run it. And did that come out in her handover notes that you might have needed more time for this?
The initiatives that had been undertaken by the previous commission to engage the courts, the parliament, as to whether we needed more time were definitely shared. They're part of the brief. But now the decision was up to me at that level as to whether that's the approach you want to take, or we're going to try to do this job in the time available.
You have been dropping hints that you are quite a man of faith. I take it you're quite a strong Christian.
I am a Christian with a strong God. So the strength is in God.
Yes.
And quite honestly, this entire project could not have been possible without the help of God. The amount of dynamics and parameters that needed to be in place within such a brief time, no one person could pull that off. It takes the grace of God to make sure that you've talked a lot about the team I had on the ground.
Yes.
To actually have the team respond positively to my engagement. I believe that's a grace of God. You've referred a lot to the composition of the commission. The expectation, I'm sure, from the people would have been that commission would give us a lot of headaches. But somehow, by God's grace, we found favor with all the people we worked with. They worked professionally, and they have been part of the team that has delivered this very incredible event. So to be able to seek intervention from Parliament when we're not getting any joy from Minister of Finance, and in a short time having Parliament intervene and get the ministry to give us resources, there were so many factors. So when I talk about the grace of God in that regard, my faith in God is that I believe God can make everything work together for your good. And I always understood that we have a duty as the Electoral Commission in a situation where we have a stalemate in the political scene because of a constitutional crisis, that we could be part of a solution to that. And that required a lot of grace.
Justice Dr. Chifundo Kachale, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much, Joab.
And that's how we come to the end of this exclusive interview with the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Justice Dr. Chifundo Kachale. My name is Joab Frank Chakhadza. Until next time, it's goodbye.